Okay, and everybody else should be muted while we're speaking. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining this What Works session. Today we are gathered here with an extraordinary panel of expert practitioners who are going to talk about the exciting topic of how to create innovative and inspiring and interactive classroom experiences for our K-12 learners. My name is Janneke Arnes. I have the honor of being the moderator for today's panel, but our panelists are the ones who are going to drive this dialogue. And I'm going to give a brief introduction to the four experts that we have gathered this afternoon. And I am very much excited to listening to what they have to say about innovation with and without technology. So our panelist in today's What Works session is Noor Al-Shatter, who is the Deputy Head of Islamic Studies at Universal American School. Welcome, Noor. We also have Linda Parsons, who is the Digital Innovation Lead at Alpha Time Education Foundation, responsible for two schools, both DERA International School and Universal American School. Welcome, Linda. We are also gathered with Anthony Copeland, who is the Academic Program Coordinator at Fairgreen International School. Welcome, Anthony.
Thank you.
Looking forward to hearing from you. At least we have Neil Statham, who is the Head of Physical Education and a member of the SLT at Heartland International School. So, representation from our schools around Dubai, and because it gives us the opportunity to hear various perspectives. We're going to kick this session off today with a panel, with allowing the panelists to talk freely about their own practitioner experience. When it comes to innovation, we're framing this first part of our webinar under the heading of Innovation is Change that Unlocks New Value. So innovation is not necessarily only technology, but how we make new value of things that we know and things that we don't know. And with that, I think I'm going to first pass over to Linda, who will talk to us about her view on how innovation change that unlocks new value. Over to you, Linda.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm thrilled to be here with the rest of the panelists today. My name is Linda Parsons, and I am Innovation Lead for the Alpha Time Education Foundation. Alpha Time Education Foundation has got two schools in it, a British curriculum school, DERA International School, and a American curriculum school, Universal American School. So the thing that I wanted to talk to you about today is innovation, and what does innovation look like in both of the schools, and perhaps also what it doesn't look like so much as well. So the idea that, and I'm so glad, Janneke, that you started off with the key quote, innovation is change that unlocks new value. It's, you know, well, I've looked at innovation over both the curriculums, and every teacher innovates. Every teacher in every classroom has the ability to innovate, because every teacher is always going to essentially try new things, but it's that why are they trying that new thing, and how does that align with your school vision, and how is that moving the school forward? Because how are you making it so that teachers can collaborate and share the new thing that they have done, and how does that improve the school? Quite a lot of my role as innovation lead is supporting teachers through that, and supporting teachers through making sure that they understand what is innovative, and what and how they can strategically use things like digital in order to catalyze that innovation and catalyze kind of new value in their education spaces. So digital is a really key catalyst for innovation, but it doesn't necessarily need to be there to be innovative. So that's what I meant by what isn't innovation. Innovation is not just using a tool. Innovation is how you use it and what impact does it have. More on that, on like what I know the other panelists will talk about that as well. So two key things I wanted to share with you is what are we using at the moment to coach our teachers. An amazing thing that we're using is something called TPAC. TPAC is very much like it's got its beginnings, or it relates to SAMR, which I'm sure you already heard of, but TPAC, which is a first on the left, the circle, is a way to strategically put new things into your classroom, so that you can, like, as a teacher, talk through why are you doing it, how does it fit in, what your students going to be doing with it, how does it empower the students. So it starts off with the content and pedagogical, which is the PAC, P pedagogical, C content. I'm not going to go through the whole thing because I know that we don't have a whole lot of time. Okay, but then like you're then going to overlay cognitive knowledge. So what are your students using to link or practice skills or mastery of concepts? And you can stop there if you wanted to. I mean, like if it is a new pedagogical technique you're using, of course, you would overlay content and overlay cognitive, and that'll be it. But you can also overlay technological with this. And what technological solution could you use in order to get that content from your head into the student's head? What pedagogical knowledge are you basing that on? What are the students doing in their cognitive knowledge? And what are they doing to technologically empower themselves? Of course, you're going to be doing this, and this is the final circle, the CK bit, the contextual knowledge. The idea that every single school is going to be different. Innovation is going to look different in every single school because the context is going to be different in every school. Every school has its own little ecosystem. Every school is going to approach something differently. Like our American curriculum school has leanings towards Google, whereas our British curriculum school has leanings towards Microsoft. That's okay. Because I mean, that means that like innovation is going to look slightly different, but the way that you approach innovation is going to be the same essentially. That is all going to be new information for your teachers because they're going to be putting something new into their classroom. So that leads me into the adapt kind of coaching method of, okay, so your leaders want you to do something innovative in their class, in your classroom, and your leaders want you to do something innovative kind of right now and develop yourself as a teacher. That's a process. Okay, and that process you need to be supported on, and that kind of coaching. I love using the adapt model for teacher coaching to show that teachers need to look at this as a learning journey for themselves, as well as a learning journey for their students. So the idea of using the adapt, attempt, A, develop, D, adapt, A, practice, P, and test, T, is from Tom Sharrington. And that is a real guiding light for our teachers, because they can be looking at that and reflecting on at what point in the adapt framework are they, and what do they need to do next in order to help their best practice. So what does innovation look like? It can look in a school like anything you want. However, it's really important to support the teachers through that journey and to make sure that that learning for the teachers is captured so that it can be then put into another classroom, maybe another grade, maybe another year, so that the culture of innovation grows within the school. So that is what innovate like that. That is what the phrase innovation is change that unlocks new value. That's what it means to me. Yeah. I do apologise actually, because I speak super fast as well. So if I spoke too fast there, just wave at me and I'll slow down. I think, Yannicka, you might be on mute because it looks like you're nodding there.
You're live, Yannicka. Yannicka, you're still on mute.
Oh my God. Am I unmuted now? My apologies for that. I think that was the delay. That was the delay in my internet connection. I was pressing the unmute button. It said unmuted in my end, but it had a very slow reaction mode. Linda, maybe that was the effect of my computer absorbing your fast speaking. It was wonderful to listen to you, Linda, and it's great to get the perspective from somebody who supports teachers in the classroom. And I really appreciate how you said that innovation can really be anything you want it to be. I'm going to hand over to Anthony, and I know that Anthony, in your school, you're connecting innovation with sustainability, and you have a great STEM program. And you have lots of brilliant practitioner ideas. Really keen to listen to what innovation means to you and how it unlocks new value.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll hand over to you, Anthony.
I'm excited to talk about it. So I've got a couple of slides, but I'm not in charge of those. So if I could have slide 1 thrown up.
Slides are up. Please go ahead, Anthony. Thank you.
Oh, right. Okay. Sorry, I didn't see them. Yeah, so just a little bit about me first, because I think that's going to help me a little bit further on. I started teaching in the UK before moving to Dubai, and then in about 2016, I moved to Hong Kong for a few years, where I started working in Hong Kong as a technology integrator and working within a makerspace. I've come back to Dubai now, and I've got a couple of interests on the go. I'm very committed to a community I'm trying to build called Maker Learners, which is bringing maker education into schools, and a coffee and code community for any teachers who are trying to teach with code. So very heavily invested in the kind of techie side of innovation, if you will. But one real turning point for me coming back to Dubai and working at Fairgreen International School is really finding not just the change nature of innovation. I think Linda really hit the nail on the head there. Innovation is successful change, right? But in joining Fairgreen, it became kind of more apparent that innovation is so much more successful if it's change driven by a purpose. So as soon as I stepped into Fairgreen International School and everything was about education for sustainable development, I had to really kind of start shifting the innovative classroom practices I had to give them that sustainability slant to them. So I think it's easy to innovate for innovation's sake, but I think something that can be quite powerful is having an authentic reason for that innovation, a sort of authentic purpose. So getting to Fairgreen, I started asking the question, well, how can I feed these innovations into the school culture and into the school ethos, and really let that terrain inform the innovations that we decided to make. And I guess I can see actually we're already on slide 2, which is what came of that. So all of the coding and electronics-y sort of stuff that I was developing started folding quite nicely into something that I named Project Sunflower, which was this massive project that we did with Grade 8, where we went through a mini electronics unit, a mini coding unit, even some cardboard craft, and we started making these solar panels that would track the sun throughout the day. So how can we kind of bring all of this together and make something that is designed to maximize the energy harvested by solar panels. That fed into a science unit on physics. So we started just learning series, parallel circuits, and then that fed into the electronics and the coding. If we jump to slide 3 then. The next part of the unit then was physics and thermal heat transfer. And we started looking at that from a bit of a less of a tech side, and it was a lot of cardboard craft and a lot of play. We started trying to design homes that were informed by kind of Middle Eastern architecture. So we started looking at courtyards and solar chimneys and wind towers, and asking ourselves, well, how could we make homes that were designed to kind of shovel that heat outside of them and to stay at quite a nice cold temperature. And that was a competition in itself. We threw some ice into those homes, put them outside for the afternoon, and measured the change in mass of those ice cubes. So really quite a lot of fun for the students. And not computed in sight for that component. So innovation without the technology. But then that built into Project Sunflower, because we thought, well, these solar panels could actually be strapped to the top of our homes, and we're actually building these really quite complex, sustainable houses. So those two units started informing each other. And I think at the end of all that, again, I've said it already, but my key takeaway was that these innovative classroom practices are so much better when they're informed by authentic problems. And if those problems are kind of what your school's mission and ethos is, then great. And I think that's my key takeaway. Don't look at another school and say, oh, they're doing this with robots, we're going to do that with robots. Really take a look at what your school culture is, what's your mission and vision, and try to innovate in that direction, make it your own. I really don't think education should be this homogenous thing where no matter which school you go to, innovation is happening in the same way. Give it your own spin, give it your own stamp. I think I spoke as fast as Linda there.
Anthony, thank you very much. You know, when you speak fast, we listen fast. And I agree with you, Anthony. I really appreciate how you emphasize that schools shouldn't strive to be similar. Schools, you know, to what is relevant for them. What environment are they in? What makes it authentic? As you said, I really appreciate that you mentioned the word authentic. To try to create authentic learning experiences for our students. I think that's incredibly powerful and gives them a sense of connection between where they are, where they live, and where their school is or where they're located. And of course, Fair Green, knowing where your school is located, sustainability, of course, goes hand in hand with your closest community, and you have a beautiful community where sustainability is elevated to a level beyond the majority of the areas in Dubai. So I'm glad to see that there is a natural connection between your school focus and, of course, the sustainable city focus as well. So I'm sure that your students feel really that this is purposeful and it connects with them. And I'm sure that Noor, from a very different perspective, you're able also to make learning environment through Islamic studies, where it does play a very interesting part. And I'm really pleased now at this point to pass to you and listen to how you have taken something very traditional and culturally incredibly strong and bridge that with something quite innovative and future oriented, and building both skill knowledge through your teaching practices in Islamic studies. So I'll hand over to you, Noor.
I will share my screen now. Clear? Hello everyone, I am Noor Shater, speaking with you today through my virtual character. I am the Deputy Head of the Islamic Department, studying a Master in Innovation, Education and Leadership. We do believe that in order to create a successful learning experience nowadays, we need to integrate technology effectively in teaching and learning. We have to speak to students in the language that helps them reach their potential, that reflects their creativity. And today, I have 3 examples to show how to create an innovative, inspiring, and interactive classroom. First of all, We can use a virtual character like I'm doing now. This works with the elementary and middle school when you want to tell them a historical story, or start the lesson by making a story with virtual characters. It can also be used in high school when you want to talk about a historical figure, a poet, a writer, or scientist. All you have to do is make an avatar that looks like the person and make him the guest speaker. And he can speak about himself in an interactive way, like we are letting the students live with this historical character in the present. You can also let the student choose the avatar that he looks like and then let them summarize the lesson they have learned, or become a scientist or poet with the avatar.
You know, I'm really worried about the diversity in the UAE. I never thought about that before.
Don't worry, the director told us that we receive all help and support at the time we reach there. Cultural diversity does not require you to have diverse expectations. You should maintain the same high expectation for all your students. Yes, you may choose to make special accommodations for those students who need them, but you want all students to excel. Maintaining different expectations for different students can wrongly teach students that cultural differences determine educational ability.
أهلا وسهلا بك في برنامج من سيربح المليون. فلنبدأ بالسؤال الأول. حددي اسم المؤتمر الذي كان هذا الفيديو هو الوجه الإعلاني له.
أعتقد أنه مؤتمر القمة العالمي للابتكار في التعليم لعام 2021. Secondly, we could use augmented reality, which depends on mixing the virtual environment with the real environment. The augmented reality offers new ways to interact with the real world. So, it presents things and turns them into 3D models, which leads to a deep and better understanding. And attracting students' attention, motivating them to reflect their understanding in an attracting way. This instills the knowledge they have learned in their memories. Augmented reality can be used in any topic because the programs vary in their content. There are specific programs that use AR to teach the alphabet. When you want to take the students on a virtual trip to study about plants and animals, there are programs where they might mention these topics. When you want to talk about the parts of a human body or space, there are programs where you can do that. You will also find a lot of programs that will make the hard to reach places come to life for students when they use them.
And I think most students enjoyed it as well because we were able to be creative with our projects and to expand our knowledge in a more hands-on way.
So for our final project, we used an augmented reality platform, and this is something that's new, innovative, and more interactive. And by using this platform, I feel like I was able to better understand the content that I was presenting and do it in a more interactive way.
In my opinion, the use of AR in Islamic studies is a great and necessary tool to help stimulate the students' learning and boost their imagination. It is a creative and modern tool that will help improve the ways of teaching and provide far more engaging methods to help us learn better instead of us following it.
Finally, we talk about the stop motion, which can also be used as a way to give students an exciting warm-up about the lesson, or to explain a specific point in any subject. But the skill comes in setting the scene for each one. For example, it was used to show the power of God in the universe by showing how the sun and moon move together in the day-to-night cycle. And at the same time, it shows how rain falls. Here is another example of the topic that can be used to talk about the ways the mind can be used to gain knowledge. You can also use it in math and make arithmetic operation with the right tools. And in language, you can use the right images for letters and make sure they match up with the images.
Hello everybody. Today we're going to be talking about the first chapter of Rasul Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam's life. Now, the Rasul was born in Mecca on the 12th of the month of Rabi' al-Awwal on the year of the elephant. His full name was Muhammad bin Abdullah bin Abdul Muttalib. Before we talk about his story, let's get to know his family a bit more. His dad's name was Abdullah bin Abdul Muttalib. His mom's name was Amina bint Wahib. And his breastfeeder's name was Halima Sa'diya, and finally his caretaker's name was Baraka Ayman.
الهجرة النبوية الشريفة. لقد كانت الهجرة أمرا متعبا للأنبياء والرسل عليهم السلام لنشر دعوتهم وحمايتها، فلم تكن الهجرة قاصرة على النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم، فقد هاجر من قبله أبو الأنبياء إبراهيم عليه السلام، وهاجر لوط عليه السلام، وهاجر موسى ومن معه من بطش فرعون.
العقل والنقل. The concepts you will hopefully learn about in this lesson can be things you apply in your everyday life. Firstly, let's discuss the differences between the two concepts. Hello, what exactly is al-aql?
Well, al-aql, simply put, is the brain. God highlighted the flaws as well as the strengths of being graced with the brain. Our brain is what helps us understand al-wahy, which are all the texts sent down from God, and helps us understand how to apply them.
In conclusion, there are no limits to the usage of these programs, but the skill will come with putting the appropriate scenario. Thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Noor. It's very interesting to see how you can use both high-tech with AR and VR and low-tech with the creative approach through stop motion, yet with very innovative use of in a subject like Islamic studies. And I really appreciate that we had the opportunity to showcase that innovation is not something that belongs only in, for example, STEM or only in a certain area, but as you absolutely said, it can be in any subject throughout any grade. And it's simply the way you find a purpose for what should happen in your classroom and to augment the students' ability to understand and retain and be engaged in their learning. So that was a great example, Noor. Thank you so much. I'll pass over to Neil. And, you'll show us, Neil, yet another perspective how you can get through different classroom practices. So handing over to you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'll put my slides up now. Hopefully you can see me. Right, okay, well, I'll start my timer. I'm going to try and stick to about 5 or 6 minutes. So I'm a lot of different things, but first and foremost, I'm a husband and father. I have 2 girls at home, so I'm constantly dealing in innovation whilst I learn to parent. And definitely with Anthony's quote, I'll jump on that, driven by purpose. I'm finding all sorts of innovative ways to navigate at home. At school, I'm head of PE here at Heartland, and I'm also the innovation lead, and I work on digital strategy. I put some ways on there. You can connect with me afterwards if you want to reach out to me. And once upon a time, I was the captain of the UAE rugby team. So I was dealing in innovation on a day-to-day basis, playing sport, perhaps in a very different way than other people might expect. And I've come to sort of cultivate my views on innovation over time. And one of the questions I asked myself first when faced with this presentation and this panel was, what's the most innovative thing I've ever seen? And it wasn't actually anything technical at all. It was when I went to Africa on a school trip, and it was in the Gambia, and it was a water collection system that they'd built in one of the villages, and it used purely recycled materials, and it was about as low tech as you could get, but it was an incredible feat of engineering, driven by purpose, to use that phrase again. And I kind of reached the same conclusion, really. Things are most innovative when they're driven by passion and they're driven by interest. But there's a fine line with that, I do think, because when you throw pressure into the mix as well, you know, sometimes pressure creates innovation, but other times it doesn't. And other times it can be very stifling. So one of my key beliefs around developing innovation and innovative environments is that we have to make sure we're allowing constantly room for failure. And it would be great if we lived in a world and in an environment where we could constantly refine and improve processes, but we have to allow ourselves and our students some time to make them a little bit worse before they get better some of the time. And I kind of think that the best innovations are without parameters most of the time. And we can often fall into habit where we try to create almost artificial innovations where we have a pre-thought out problem and we have a pre-thought out solution, and we start with a wide net of parameters and we gradually close them in. And if we're not careful, we can squeeze out some of those innovative opportunities in there, because when we present our students with problems, sometimes we've already decided what the solution is. And we've got a massive bias internally when it comes to overvaluing the solutions that we present. And when we limit them in that way, you know, whether it's through specifying the device that they have to use, whether it's specifying the operating system that they have to work on, we close our mindset to a lot of the alternatives that are there, and we move away from one of our end goals in personalization, which is individualized solution and personalization of the process. And often some of the things we do to try and drive it are not reflective of real life. And some of us or some of our students will work in environments in the future where they are in a solutions-based job, and the solutions will exist within certain parameters. And those skills will be very domain specific, which they'll learn in course. But perhaps actually what we should be doing is shooting for that utopia where there are less scaffolds that are provided. And the question that maybe we should ask ourselves is, when we're innovating, is how are we trying to actually create this environment? And I think you could end up actually doing one of three things, and you might inadvertently be trying to do all three things at the same time. And in my thoughts, as I tried to put them down on paper before this, I boiled it down to one of three areas. You know, the question you need to ask yourself first and foremost is, are you trying to innovate on an organizational level? So is your school trying to be innovative in something it does, in its offering, in its curriculum design? Or are you trying to allow teachers or support teachers to be innovative in their individual lesson delivery? Or are you actually trying to create an environment for students to innovate within? And if we're not careful, we can lump all these ideas in together, and they're actually three very distinct things. So I'm going to give you three examples now of three things that we've been working on here, three things we've been trying to do at Heartland that I think hopefully fit into three of the different areas. So I'll move on to the next slide. So the one in the middle there, what you can see is an AI camera. So that's an environment or an organizational one. So we've worked with the company to have a little trial of this AI camera that sits in the sports hall, and it films and records games and parts of lessons for us. So we can use that Pixel camera to download footage, and we can use that to capture moments of learning, capture moments of performance. And with that tool, it allows teachers to then be very innovative in how they choose to, or how they choose not to, use it to present problems or present solutions. In terms of another environmental one, a student-based one, our students have got their own innovation podcast at the school that's on Spotify, and that's far more of a supporting role that the school plays on that. We don't dictate the topics that the students want to talk about. In fact, it's more of a receptacle for them to collect their thoughts and share their ideas. So as we move down onto that student open-ended innovation area where we're trying to create the environment for students, we're removing a lot of the dictation of the rules around it about what we're actually asking them to do. And then perhaps my favorite one of all is where I think we get to the zenith of student-based innovation, where students are already working on something individually and independently, and the role that we're actually playing as a school is just a supporting mentoring role, and we're very much a supporting character. One of our students has got her own NFT project called Elvin there, so she's now at the age of 13 drawing her own digital art and selling it on the blockchain to people all around the world, financing her own projects, and then also further generating money for charity. And when we get to those innovations which are driven by passion and driven by interest, we're suddenly looking at innovation in a completely different way. So for me, where I enjoy my innovation work with the students most is where I step the furthest away from the idea generation and leave the idea generation part to the students, and I try and remove myself into the role of a supporter and a mentor, and take more of the stance or the approach that maybe my ideas aren't the best or possibly aren't even needed here, and if I hand that thinking space over to students, who knows what wonderful things they'll do. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Neil, really very interesting. Also, you asked some thought-provoking questions, and I think the three main strands of innovation, as you say, there's nothing wrong with any of them in isolation. The challenge might be when you try to lump everything together and you kind of lose focus. But I really love how you led us into the thought of the student voice and how important it is that students are actually both driving the learning but also driving the innovation, and that we facilitate for them, then steer them, because they're the ones who need the skills to go out and be successful and to find solutions. So if we create opportunities in our schools for the students to be the problem solvers, and if those are the skills that we give them so that they are ready to embrace that when they go out and into kind of the real world, if we like. I think that's a brilliant segue for a quick, unfortunately, I mean, this is a topic, no, sorry, it's wrong saying unfortunately, this is a topic. The fact with this topic is that it's so wide and we could talk so much about it, and just one short hour is nowhere near enough. But I'd love to pick up on what Neil raised here in terms of the students and their advocacy and their voice, and have all of you reflect very briefly, 1 to 2 minutes, on how you see kind of the classroom of the future. Not the brick and mortar, confined to that brick and mortar structure, but how do you allow, or how can you envision that schools will be learning spaces for students, broken away from the brick and mortar, but where student agency is really the driver for what the kind of the future classroom looks like. And we'll maybe go first to we'll do it random and ask Anthony to go first with that. Did you whisper that, Linda, without me seeing it? I'd look for
See that, so I'll send it to Anthony. No, I'm more than happy to talk about student agency. I think it is such an important component of school culture, and it's often something that's overlooked. I think it's important that students feel like active and important members at a school and not just passengers. I think for me, the best example I've come across at fostering student agency within a school is when I've dealt with educational makerspaces, schools that have kind of developed their own space for the maker movement to kind of take root. I've started writing my thesis on makerspaces in the UAE, and I think at the start of that I thought it was all about the tools and the spaces, but the more I've kind of dived into it, the more I've realised that maker culture is kind of space agnostic, and it's more to do really about the activities and the community that you build. So having students with expert knowledge in a particular tool or technology becoming the teachers, and also reaching out to your parent community or your wider school community and seeing who the experts are who could come in for a bit of just-in-time learning. So I think for me, the classroom of the future just has a lot more of that maker culture, a lot more of that kind of constructionist learning that we've seen coming out of the US from people like Seymour Papert. who really was, I think, the first driver, and I think actually the guy that coined the term, right, for constructionist thinking, after the work that he did with Seymour Papert, not with Piaget. So yeah, for me, a lot more constructionist, having students solve authentic problems and displaying their learning by making these tangible things. I think for me, that's the next step. That's the next direction for teaching and learning. And I think you're on mute, Yannicka.
Let's see.
Okay.
Please go ahead, Yannicka. You're on mute, Yannicka, sorry. We still can't hear you, Yannicka.
I keep talking about making.
We'll pass on over to Linda. Linda, please share your thoughts.
Yeah, I do totally agree with what Anthony was saying, and it's just like the idea of the classroom of the future is not necessarily going to be in a classroom. The classroom of the future is not necessarily going to be in four walls, and neither is it going to be in a place where like it would be seen as kind of like our classrooms at the moment are really square, you know, and like things like that, like it's not relevant nowadays to the kind of like the shared working environment, the collaborative working environment in like, you know, big industry. So why are we teaching our students in these kinds of spaces? So the like what we can learn from the American curriculum schools, what we can learn from the American thinking of how maker spaces are created, can be like, you know, really well used, but also like it's not just a space, it's what you're actually doing within that space, and bringing in like the idea of like real life situations and problem solving scenarios, and making sure that our classrooms of the future do have that collaboration, like, you know, international collaboration, as kind of like a standard, and not as a, like, for instance, I'm gonna give an example that we did together with a couple of schools last year. We did Safer Internet Day, and we connected with 27 different schools in many different countries, but that was a one-off. But nowadays, why not do that all the time? Like, why not have, you know, like that kind of content creation by our students, and be using that as a standard in our classrooms of the future, because our students do need to be content creating. That's how they show that they're learning. Right, so those are my thoughts. Like, but I think like Neil, like you've got some thoughts on this as well, like the future of, like, what does it look like? What does the future look like?
Yeah, I certainly do. I don't have the crystal ball though, Linda, that you're perhaps suggesting, but I do have some ideas.
Awesome. So
share them, Neil, please.
I think they can still hear you, Neil. Like, I'll just do some jazz hands in there, you know.
No, I'm on now. I think time is a big thing for me, and the traditional timetable model is something that will get reviewed in due course, because I think how often every teacher could probably relate to the situation where a eureka moment is just coming, or you've just hit that moment that you've been striving for the entire lesson, but it's time to pack up. Sometimes whilst there's lots of benefits to the rigidity of the traditional timetable, I think that'll be one of the things that we look back on maybe in 20 or 30 years time and think, why did we ever stop these things while they were in motion, when we're just getting to the good bit? You know, it's sometimes when you stop to think of it, it seems crazy. And I think if I think about my own learning, and people reflect on their own learning as adults, possibly, you know, there are times where I want to learn as part of a group and I can move myself into that environment. There are also times where it's better for me to be on my own in a far different sounding and feeling environment, and I take myself to a more personal space. And I think there's scope for that in terms of the design of some of these places, and as soon as you go off to university, you have the autonomy to do it. So something magical happens over that 6 month or that 2 month summer period, where we go from learning in groups all the time and rarely being on our own to suddenly being able to learn on our own. So I think it would be great if it incorporated some of those things as well. And I think from a PE, sport and health perspective, I think the learning environments of the future will possibly start to take more into account the optimal physical conditions and mental conditions for learning, and they'll look at, you know, whether it's data-driven well-being or whether it's individualized feedback on well-being and fatigue and tiredness and readiness. And to come back to time again, perhaps we'll see some of those traditional schooling hours start to change or morph, or allow people to work around those depending on how they're feeling at the time. They would be my thoughts.
Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts, and thank you all of you for being problem solvers when the technology was not on my side, and my unmute button simply didn't want to respond to my finger touch. And saying, Anthony, that I would have loved to be a student in your creative classroom and be more part of a constructivist, constructivist approach. As a student, that's definitely where I hope that a lot of schools will take education into the future and allow the students to be much more hands-on. Neil, one of the things that you mentioned in your presentation when you introduced yourself was also how one of the most innovative things that you had ever seen was a very low tech. It wasn't actually tech at all, but it was a brilliant engineering problem solving approach to a locally contextual problem. And I think that's where we want our students to be, that they're able to what they know, what they see is the problem, and try to do something about it. Noor, I'd love to hear from you as well, how you foresee the classroom of the future. Is it brick and mortar? Is it place-based, or is it much more contextual for you too?
In my thought, this is the aura of virtual classroom, the common perception people have about future classes is how they can make the student feel like they are in the world they are learning about by turning the school halls into a room with 9D screen. They let the student live the events of the lesson they are studying, whether through screen in the classroom or through virtual reality outside of the classroom. Maybe artificial intelligence may use to support students who need more attention, for example, by using virtual or robot teacher who can provide them with the help they need. Yes.
Yeah, great. That's actually a brilliant thing you mentioned there. So a virtual teacher that can help the students with the needs that they have. So you can really personalize at a deeper level, because as one teacher in the classroom, as much as you want to support each and every single learner, time is a critical factor. I love how you challenged our thinking about the and timetabling. One of the questions that were asked of this webinar was actually, how do you manage to innovate when you only have a 45-minute block? And on top of that, you also need to differentiate. So between Neil's challenge to throw out the traditional timetable and Noor, your comment about maybe a augmented reality or virtual reality teacher support, does anyone want to give a reflection on that kind of urge and how we could foresee an optimization of personalization and innovation happening, even if there is a time constraint? I don't know if Linda, would you want to say one sentences about that?
Yes. Yes, I have so much to say about this, so I'm going to summarize it into hopefully something that's about a minute long. But like the whole idea of having so much technology in our classroom now is not so much to replace the teacher, but it is to support that teacher and support the students, to help the personalization of learning. Now, how can that happen? Well, there's so many platforms now that would give AI help and support for questioning and data collection for teachers that can really be tapped into easily for a classroom teacher, and it helps the classroom teacher become less overwhelmed in the classroom, particularly if you've only got 45 minutes to kind of do all these things. Like, of course, you're going to need help in that classroom, and the computer can do all the kind of admin side of kind of like the personalization, so that the end result, the student can deal with, you know, the content and have like, you know, all of that there for them. But also what Noor said is also so important, like the role of that third teacher being a tool for inclusivity and a tool for immersion, and to make sure that the class is relevant by using VR and that everyone can access by using accessibility tools like Translate or Immersive Reader. That's the role of the third. Well, that's what I think the role of the third teacher in the classroom is, because essentially you're always going to need a teacher. You're always going to need that human kind of input there, because teaching is a social thing, like we're social animals. So we're not going to substitute the teacher, but we're going to redefine that teacher by using technology. Go on, Neil.
Yeah, challenge that, Neil.
No, I was just going to maybe not challenge, hopefully support. I was just going to add two things. That number one, that innovation people seem to think that innovation has to happen quickly, when often it doesn't. You know, some of the best solutions have taken a long time to develop, and that's why they're the best solutions. And it goes hand in hand with my second point, which would be that innovation doesn't always have to have a physical outcome at the end of it. You know, it isn't always making or creating. Sometimes it is, which is great, but innovation in thought and innovation in approach and innovation in imagining solutions to things are all equally valuable. And all these great ideas that have produced great outcomes started in a room somewhere with people imagining a solution to a problem. So I think, you know, if you feel pressure to produce something tangible or physical at the end, you know, it doesn't always have to be like that.
No, you're absolutely right, Neil. I think what all of you have said using various words, but you've all talked about intentional, purposeful, authentic, creating those learning experiences or an environment where those are the driving forces for learning for students. Then innovation is not a project. In a way, innovation is just a mindset, and it's a way of developing the students' skills so that they can innovate outside of the school environment, but in their mind. Not that we're not developing a generation of learners who are just kind of taking in knowledge, but that they are actually, that we're developing a generation of learners who have a mindset where they are curious and where they continue to think and look for solutions, rather than seeing just obstacles and waiting for somebody to spoon feed them the solution how to do things. So I really appreciate how you have emphasized that. And then in that way, and I recognize that we are short of time now, but in that way, I think you've all identified how innovation is that change that unlocks new, and it is sometimes driven by tech and sometimes not, sometimes high tech, sometimes low tech, and sometimes it has nothing to do with technology at all. So I really appreciate how you've all brought the student to the forefront, and I think any student of yours is fortunate to have you as their teachers, and I hope that our listeners have appreciated hearing hearing your thoughts about this and picked up some great ideas that they can implement in their own schools as well. Before we wrap up today, I'm going to pass over to Magnus. I know we'd love to run a quick Mentimeter with our audience. So Magnus, do you want to set up the Mentimeter for us?
Yes, thank you so much, Jannica. Yes,
wonderful.
For those of you still left here, we'd be very grateful if you could log on to menti.com. I put the code there in the live chat, so it's Menti code number 751121. But I will also start sharing my screen. So 2 simple Menti questions left. So, gosh, not this one. What am I doing? That's the wrong one. Let's see here. We go to this one here. I hope everyone can see my screen. So just an overall satisfaction. If you could just type in there 1 to 5, the quality of the content of the webinar, the structure of the webinar, and the presenters' preparedness, we'd be very grateful. And again, you see the Menti code in the top there, 21751121. Very, very grateful for your answers there, and I'll give it another 10 seconds. I think we've had a fantastic attendance today. We've also had a fantastic panel here with some very, very interesting discussions. If we move on to the last question here, is what has been the main takeaway from today's webinar? So just share a couple of words of what has been your main takeaways. What are you going to bring back to the classroom after this webinar? We've heard from Linda, we've heard from Anthony, we've heard from Neil and from Noor. Some really, really interesting stuff. Linda talked about the TPAC concept. Anthony talks about the maker culture, the constructional thinking, for instance. Neil mentioned the way they're using AI cameras in the sports hall for recording of games as such, and to include students using innovation, podcasts, etc. So wonderful, and we're getting first replies here now. Innovation looks different in every school. Each school should use their own mission and vision to implement and innovate in their own way. Absolutely. Innovation doesn't have to be tangible outcomes always. Innovation does not have to be high tech. Could be low tech, just like Jannica said. Yeah, love the innovation ideas presented by all schools. We'll definitely apply them in our school, and making the lessons interactive and innovative. Wonderful. The impact of augmented reality and technology in a classroom. Yeah, just like Noor presented there. I think it was really, really wonderful to see that in action. Let's just see here. We have some more replies. Future classrooms. Absolutely. The concept of what will the classroom look like in the future? Will there even be a classroom? Will there be teachers? Will they be called mentors? What will they be called? Peer-to-peer learning? Who knows? And we'll also have to figure out the blended learning model for the future as well. Interesting insights into sharing innovative ideas and strategies. Innovation is a mindset, very much so. Different platforms for entertaining the classroom and students while teaching. Wonderful. Innovation is a must in the 21st century to make the students make them critical thinkers. I want to say a big, big thank you to those of you who answered this Menti. Wonderful. And I am now going to hand back over to Jannica for some final thoughts from today's discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Magnus, and thanks for doing the Menti. It's great to hear the thoughts of our audience as well, and I appreciate the input that our audience has shared today. I also really appreciate the time that Linda, Noor, Neil, and Anthony that you gave to come together in this panel this afternoon. And I think we'll leave it with innovation as a mindset, because that is really what we are talking about. And high tech, low tech is not the importance. The time, or whether it's tangible or non-tangible, is not necessarily the essence either. But really that state of mind where innovation and curiosity go hand in hand. I would like to thank everyone for your willingness to share. I would also like to tell our audience that all of these educators are very active in Dubai, and you can follow them on Twitter and LinkedIn and other social media platforms. You will see them talking at guests or BET or taking part in panel discussions at conferences, and we're very grateful that they are supporting also the KHDA What Works webinar series, because this is really a strong platform for all educators in Dubai to get together and to learn from each other. Peer-to-peer learning is also how we can grow and in our own mindset, and how we can pick up great ideas from other practitioners that are in the same field as ourselves. So thank you all of you for your time today. Thank you to our listeners. Thank you to KHDA for facilitating this, Maya and Magnus. It's wonderful that we have the opportunity to get together with the KHDA What Works X series so frequently. So stay tuned for more webinars to come in the near future. And you can also find the recording later when it will be uploaded on the website. And Magnus, do you want to just give a quick reminder to where our audience can find the webinar recordings?
Yes, of course. So we have something called newdaysnewways.com. And essentially, we have a library section there. So if you go onto New Days, New Ways, and essentially go to the What Works X webinars in the top bar there, and then you'll find a whole host of webinars that we've hosted since the onset of the pandemic. So I think we began our first webinars in end of April, beginning of May. So you'll find a whole host of webinars there. So that's where they're stored. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone. My name is Janneke Arnes. I was honored to be the moderator for the panel. I wish everyone now a wonderful afternoon. And I believe we will stop the recording, and I'll say goodbye for now.
Goodbye.